located?
I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, Dennis. Well, welcome
Oh,
to the show, Dennis Polonich. Dennis, I'm Ricky O. I'm out here with the Hockey World Order. I am in Nashville, Tennessee. Originally a New York, New Jersey resident my whole life. I moved down here about 6 years ago. I don't know if I could say I enjoy it, but it's definitely a different atmosphere. Where are you at right now in life?
well, I'm in Scottsdale, North Scottsdale, for the winter. We have a daughter. My oldest daughter lives here, which is 5 minutes down the road. So she's got three kids. We got three grandkids. So it's nice to follow them around. They're very athletic.
Oh, really? What do they play?
Jasha, the 13-year-old, is on the national junior uh, gymnastics team. So hopefully she makes it to the Olympics in 28. And then there's two twin boys, Nico and Teo, that play baseball, football, basketball.
So they all got grandpa's
Well,
athleticism.
I like to tell people I got a little bit to do with it, but their dad was a football player and their mother was a volleyball golfer.
That's excellent that you get to spend time with family. That's so important in life. Especially getting to see the leadership and everything that Grandpa had. And did they go back and get to watch any of the old time film? Did they
Well,
ask you a lot of questions?
yeah, they asked me why I spent so much time in the penalty box.
Oh, I was going to get to that too. They stole my question. Well, let's get you started. You came up in 1971, 72. You played in Flin Flon, and now to a guy from New Jersey, Flin Flon seems like it's as far away as Mars. But as a hockey town, it's as a kid, I was a little different. I grew up on the NHL. Absolutely the only thing that ever captivated my interest. So I remember reading books about Bobby Clark and Flin Flon and different stories in junior. What was it like to play there as a young kid? What'd you start at 16 there?
Yes, and I left home when I was 15 and lived with my uncle in Moose Jaw. Played hockey there with actually with Clark Gillies, and that we won the provincial championships back then. And then I wanted to advance my career, so I was looking for a place to play. And a goalie by the name of Herman Hordell told the coach Patty Janelle, there's this little guy from Foam Lake. I know him. He'd love an invite to training camp. So the way I went on a bus, and you're right about the proximity. I didn't know where I was going, but I didn't want to come home. So I
Right.
did. I went to the training camp and I did all I could to make the team. And I got to tell you a funny story. When I called Patty Janelle after I got the invite. He's a legendary junior coach, and I had a pair of skates, but I didn't have authentic CCM tax. We didn't have any money, so my father couldn't afford that. So I wanted to call Patty Janelle, and I asked him the question, if I make the team, Mr. Janelle, what kind of skates should I bring? And he didn't understand the question. Sonny, bring the fastest ones you got.
That's a good answer. So did they end up getting you CCMs?
I made the team, and he took me to the hardware store and got my first pair of CCM tackleberries.
That's
I think
amazing.
I might have slept with them that night.
That's amazing. Those are the stories that are just missing today. As an athlete, I played baseball, and I remember I was a catcher, and I had the privilege of playing in the U.S. national program for a while. But I remember as a kid, my dad was a truck driver, my mom worked in a bank, and every penny mattered. And I remember getting my first really good, expensive catcher's mitt. And I remember, like you said, I think I slept with that thing for 2 weeks. It's like
Yeah,
that's gone today. Like kids are a little pampered when it comes to sports, in my opinion. I think today these athletes don't appreciate the value of a dollar when they're younger as much as people like
exactly,
yourself had to do.
exactly. And when I played junior in Flin Flon, I worked in the mine for 4 hours a day because they sponsored the hockey team. Um, but yeah, I came from a family of five kids. We didn't have much, and you learned how to manage what you had and protect what you had, and to this day, it's boded me well.
Well, I think that's where you get a little bit of your ruggedness, which we'll get into in a little while. But when you grow up on a farm and you grow up playing in Flin Flon, and what was it, like -20 on those bus rides? I remember reading stories about the glass being frozen over on the bus and the roads being just undrivable at some points. And, I think it puts a little bit of an edge in your game.
Well, it certainly builds character. You learn how to deal with stuff, and you learn how to deal with situations. You certainly, back then, you couldn't throw the towel in. What else were you going to do?
Right. Absolutely. Well, you go to Flin Flon, and one of your teammates is somebody who grows up to be one of your adversaries in the pros, and that's Gary Howard. Um, Gary, I'm a Ranger fan, so I just remember Jim Gordon saying Gary Howard is blacksmith strong, and the guy was fearless. He's a Tasmanian devil. What was it like playing with him as a teenager? Because the two of you must have raised some hell up there.
Well, we did. We stirred the pot, and if you look at that roster, my God, we had a tough team. We had Jack McElhardy, who went on to play pro for a number of years, was a tough kid. Myself, Gary Howard. Um, so teams used to come up and play on the weekend, and we would play Saturday night, and then they play Sunday afternoon, and uh, and after the game, get the hell out of town because they had a long bus ride home. So
The Flin Flon flu, correct? I remember hearing that a
yeah,
couple times in books.
we made it awful difficult for them that second game.
Who was your biggest who was your idol growing up as a kid? Who was the player that you looked up to and said, I'm going to model myself after?
Well, because I played in Flin Flon, I heard so much about Bobby Clark, and then I followed him in the NHL, and then once I made the NHL, I ended up playing against him. So that memory sticks out, and of course Bobby Orr, Gordie Howe. I took the opening face off at Joe Louis Arena when they put his two sons on his wing. That'll never happen again.
Right.
Trust me, that was a feel good moment, and I trust me, I let him win the face off too.
You let him win it? um, who was the first? What was the first sweater growing up that you got? When you were a kid, what was the first team sweater
Well,
that you got?
I was a big Toronto Maple Leafs fan. Back then, it was Hockey Night in Canada, Saturday night, and Dave Keon was my idol. I was Dave Keon when I played road hockey,
You play? Yeah, everybody has that guy.
and he was number 14. And when I went to Flin Flon, that's the number I wore in Flin Flon, number 14. And then when I made Detroit, I wore number 8.
So you're in juniors, you're playing, you put up good numbers your first year. You put up 30 points, 200 minutes in penalties as a 16-year-old. I mean, that's no small feat in that league. Your second year, you got 74 points. What was the jump? What made the difference? Was it just different line mates? Was it more ice time? Was it confidence?
No, a lot of credit has to go to the coach, Patty Janelle. He's seen my drive, he's seen my tenacity, he's seen my toughness, and he molded me into the player that I became. In junior, especially my second year, I played against a lot of the other team's top lions like Dennis Sobchuk, Clark Gillies, and Mike Wanchuk when we played the Pats, and that became my mo when I made the Red Wings. I played against the other team's top lions. So when you play against the other team's top lions, you're going to get extra ice time.
I remember being a kid. I was only 4 or 5. I was actually 6 years old when you were in the NHL for the first time. And I kind of remember watching you play and saying, like, the size difference at the time. Like, I remember in New York, we would get the Rangers and the Islanders on WOR. And I remember watching you fight Gillies. I remember you going toe to toe with everybody. I remember you never backing down, getting Hockey Night in Canada every once in a while here. We would get Hockey Night in Canada locally and getting to watch you play. When you got to the NHL, your first 4 games, obviously, there wasn't much to it in 74, 75. You were down with Virginia, I believe, was the
Yeah.
first. Actually, they were AHL at the time. And you put up 34 points in almost 200 minutes again. What was that jump? And what was that like going to the AHL? Like, who was the senior guys there? Who was the coach? Who was the mentor on that team?
Well, Doug Barkley again was the coach, and he took a shine to me and recommended that I get called up to Detroit. And slowly I was getting closer and closer to my dream. But I get asked that all the time, Rick. How come you were so tough? Like, well, what? And it's hard to answer. And it's not a matter of bench pressing 500 pounds or squat lifting 300 pounds or whatever. It's a state of mind. And again, the growing up on the farm, not having much, it gave you the ability to deal with with adverse conditions. And
Absolutely. And you remind me a lot of one of my favorite players of all time, and he was my guest on here a couple of weeks ago, Eddie Johnstone. The two, you look alike, you're built alike, you played a very similar game. And he mentioned the same thing as you. He said, look, we grew up on a farm. We had it, you had to be tough. There was no saying I'm not going out to do my chores in -5-degree weather because you didn't eat if you didn't do it. You watched your dad go out and struggle and do whatever he did, farming and stuff. And it just built a different aura around that generation of hockey players. And I think that'll never be back again, to be honest with you.
well, there weren't many options back then. And once you chose a path, you didn't deviate. So yeah, it was an interesting. When I look back now, it was an interesting path, and I wouldn't change it for anything. If I did it today, I'd do the same thing. And like
Right.
you said, now with the grandkids and that, without interfering too much, yeah, you teach the kids to to be a little bit tough, to be a little bit nasty, to to know how to compete and so forth, show
Do
up.
you watch a lot of the game today? Do you watch a lot of modern hockey?
Uh, Occasionally, but I'm not. I don't follow anybody in particular, but I like strong performances. I like watching Patrick Mahomes. I think he's unreal. So yes, I like sports is my life.
Right. The NHL now, the last couple seasons, I've noticed, and I'm a big physicality guy. I mean, I have my Eddie Jockman hanging up behind me, but everybody else on the wall is I got Jay Wells, I've got Nicky Fatigue all over the place. I loved growing up watching physicality and physical hockey. I've noticed an edge coming back to the NHL the last 2 or 3 years. I think they have started to get now the talent level is much better, but they've also come back to a little bit to having the physicality in hockey because I think they got away from it for about 5-6 years where the game almost became figure skating. And that's me saying that, not you. I just think it almost became unwatchable at a point because the stick work became so bad. There was no accountability. You had little guys running around just hacking people in the legs and ankles, and nobody had an answer to that. And I think the game really regressed. And I see it coming back up now where there's a lot more. And I think this four countries challenge is going to do a lot to bring back some national pride back to the game with Canada and the U.S. and Sweden. But that was something that you guys never lacked. The Rangers maybe played Detroit twice a year back in the day. And yet those games were like Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals all the time. And that intensity was bred into you guys. Coming up, who on Detroit sits down a young Dennis Polonich and says, "Play your game"? Like as a player, who was the mentor to you when you first walked in
Well,
that room?
it was interesting. I played with Dan Maloney,
Right,
who's a top left winger, Dennis Hextall, Bugsy
Mickey
Watson,
Redmond.
Mickey Redmond, Danny Grant. So there was a lot of good role models there, and like you said, I had the ability to keep my mouth shut and just watch and earn the respect of your teammates.
When you go up to Detroit, did you live with another family? Did you live in a hotel? What was that like becoming an NHLer on a regular basis for the first time?
No, I had rented a house. Actually, there was two or three. Bill Ahead was a first round pick. Uh, got a few 100,000 for a signing bonus, so he bought a house on the lake, and I think two other players, lived with him. So there was three of us in the home. So yeah, for the first while I rented, and then once I established my career in that, I bought a condo in West Bloomfield.
So young, wild, and free the first year with a lake house up there in Detroit as a rookie. Must have had some fun up there.
Oh, we had fun. I can say, we didn't have great teams, but Detroit loved their athletes. So yeah, whenever you went out, I had many free meals, and many drinks bought for me over the years.
Now, when you came up, they were playing at the Joe, or was that at the Olympic at the time?
No, I played it. I played in the Olympia.
You played
I
in the
played,
Olympic. What were some
and
of the
the Olympia was perfect for me because it was oval. It was small corners and stuff, so I could forecheck and you know and use the body.
That was one of my questions I was going to get to. Is that era of hockey did not have regulation rinks? Like nothing was the same. Boston was different. The Olympic was different. The
Exactly.
Auden Buffalo was different.
Yeah,
What
you
was
had
that like playing your home games on that smaller ice surface? Like you said, that had to be an advantage.
yes, it was, and like I said, you could dump the puck in and be right on top of the defenseman in a hurry.
What was your favorite road arena to play in?
Well, I got to tell you, growing up in small town Saskatchewan, watching Hockey Night in Canada, I remember the first time I went to Maple Leaf Gardens. Oh my God, or Montreal Forum, and then Boston Bruins. There's so much tradition and history in the original six teams. So all those buildings were amazing when you play your first game in there.
As a teenager, I got to go to the Montreal Forum for a game, and it was like walking into like a Roman like church, like back in the day. It was just like godlike walking in that building. Like you felt the history of that building just walking in. I can't imagine playing
Yeah,
on that
and
ice.
it's an amazing feeling.
First NHL goal, who just scored against?
I think I scored it against Bill McKenzie, Colorado Rockies, and Vaclav Nedomansky assisted on it.
Nedomansky was a very underrated player. He was a good hockey
He
player.
was he was in the latter part of his career when he came to to North America to play, but yeah, he was an amazing player.
He ended up on the Rangers for a little bit when Esposito was the GM. Espo traded for him, and he talked about him all the time about how great he was. And Espo used to talk about his international play, and Jim Gordon would say, "But that was 15 years ago, Phil." So that was always funny to watch. First NHL fight. Who'd you get into the first scrap with?
Oh God, I don't even remember. I should, with technology today, I should get on the internet and Google and find out who some of my combatants were. But no, I can't remember.
Who was the toughest guy you ever squared off with?
Well, there was a lot of guys that I wouldn't say I stayed away from, but I was very cautious. And
You didn't stay
I
away
remember,
from anybody. Don't use the word stay away. You fought them all. You were in there with Gillies, Howard. You were in there with O'Reilly. Like I never saw you back down from anybody. So there was no stay
well,
away from in Dennis's game.
Stan Jonathan was he was a tough cookie. My size kind of guy. Um, Larry Robinson, who never ever fought.
Larry was
Was
so underrated. Like I've seen
yeah,
Larry Robinson fight Dave Schultz and just handle him. And I talked to Tom Laidlaw last week, and we had a very good interview, and he mentioned Larry and how people, even in his last years, didn't want to test Larry Robinson. So that says a
yeah,
lot for
very respected player, and that's why they won the Stanley Cups. They had a core of those guys.
Dave Schultz, pro or con.
Dave Schultz, I fought him three times in one game, and one day I pulled up to the Detroit Olympia for a morning skate, and they were just getting they had done their meetings or pregame skate, and they were getting on the bus, and he started to come towards me on the thing, started chirping me and stuff. And I told him, I said, Dave, I said, go back to your team, go home, have your 6 pack of bananas, and I said, I'll see you at 6:30.
That's fantastic. Now, this is obviously again growing up loving the tough aspect of hockey. You got to respect Dave. But one of the things I noticed about Dave Schultz was Dave was a pack fighter where when the Flyers had Hound Dog Kelly, they had Bridgman, they had all these other guys that would just go into a scrum, and it was never one-on-one with the Flyers. It was 5-on-1 until your teammates responded back. And when Dave got separated from that pack, Dave Schultz was not the same guy when he went to L.A. or when he went to Pittsburgh. Dave Schultz kind of shied away a little bit more from that tough aspect when he didn't have that gang mentality with him.
Exactly, and I noticed that as well. And in fact, I went after him a couple of times because I wanted to get even. I remember playing against the Flyers, and I'd line up against Bobby Clark and Reggie Leach and Bill Barber, and Fred Shearer would take Bill Barber off, and out comes Dave Schultz. Well, here we go, or Mad Dog Kelly. So yeah, if you scuffled with one, you took on the whole pack.
Yeah, it was Solaski and all of those guys, and then later on in the
I,
years it was that same mentality. But when Holmgren and Cochran and those guys came up there too.
well, and you know what? To their credit, good for them. They use that mojo, or they use that formula. And they won two Stanley Cups in the mid '70s.
Yeah, they took that gang mentality, and it was if you mess with one, we're gonna kill you, and that was the first time in hockey where a whole team got together and did that, and they did. They won two Stanley Cups. What was the most intimidating arena to go in to play against when you were in the NHL?
Oh boy, uh, probably Philadelphia, one of them.
The
I
Spectrum?
would, yeah, the Spectrum again because of that pack mentality.
And the fans there were so on top of you. Everybody talks about Tom Laidlaw, Eddie Johnstone. They all talk about how the fans were up and down, like literally almost on your bench. They could reach over and get on the ice in a second.
Yeah, well, I played in a tough era. In the mid '70s, you had Philadelphia, you had the Boston Bruins. In the early '70s, you had the Philadelphia Flyers in the mid '70s, and then you had the Islanders and Montreal. So
Right. No one ever mentions the Rangers when this conversation comes up. That was always the one team, and that's my favorite team. Always traded away their toughness. The Bano,
well,
Maxwell, the Plaguers. They always had everybody and got rid of them. Moose Dupont, like he's another one with
yeah,
the Flyers.
I
And the
see.
Rangers just never were tough.
Yeah, I see your Eddie Jockman jersey there, and I have a heartwarming story. Eddie and I carpooled to the rink in Detroit when he was in Detroit, and I remember going shortly after he got traded to the Wings. We went back to New York, and we
The
played
next
against
day.
the next day, and I was starting the game, so I was lined up on the blue line for the national anthem. When the national anthem was over, I would don my helmet, and it's customary. You go back and you pat the goalie on the pads, and have a good one. And the tears were streaming down his face. You couldn't hear the national anthem. It was
Yeah.
Eddie, Eddie, and lo and behold, we I think if you look, we got outshot like 2-1,
John
and
Davison got booed. The Ranger goalie was booed that entire game.
yeah, and we ended up winning the game. I think 5-4 or 5-2 or whatever. Eddie was unconscious.
I'll tell
Uh,
you a story about that game. So I was a little kid. I was probably 7. And at the time, my hometown, we did not have cable TV. So we only got Ranger road games. And we would listen to Marv Albert around the family living room. We'd put the radio on and we'd listen. Well, when they announced Eddie was starting, my dad woke us up and was like, hey, you might want to listen to this.
but
So we started listening to it. And by the time the Eddie chant started, my dad loaded up the station wagon, got me and my two brothers, who were like a year old and an infant, and got us in a car with my mom and drove us to a hotel 20 miles away so that had cable so we could watch that game. And I never, my dad is still alive. I still have my dad, and I've seen my dad cry twice in my life, and that was when my uncle died and when Eddie Jockman was crying with the Rangers.
wow,
And Eddie became part of our family. My brother was a phenomenal high school goalie here in New Jersey, and Eddie Jockman was his personal goalie coach for 2 years at the rink we played at. We had Roger Bear and Eddie Jockman as coaches on staff there, and I loved Eddie so much that I would just talk his ear off. And he gave me his home number, and he's like, just call me anytime, kid. Just call me at home. We'll talk. And I would blow up his phone to the point where his wife would answer the phone and be like, Rick, do me a favor. Eddie didn't say this. This is me. We're having dinner. He's not going to get up and talk to you right now. I'm not going to allow it. You got to call back tomorrow. And I would just blow his phone up all the time. And he never said no. He never got off the phone. And I heard he's in poor health right now. And I pray every day that he's okay, because he's one of those guys in hockey that just meant something to us as a fan,
well, it's just again, it's a testament as to what impact athletes have on not only kids but just on society, especially if they're good people.
Well, that was an era too where Eddie and Billy Smith, those guys took no shit from nobody.
Uh,
Eddie was right out there with Gary Howard and Gary Dornhofer all the time,
yeah,
Dave Schultz,
they-
and
yeah, very competitive. I
competitive
can't.
is the key word.
Yeah.
So you go into the Leafs. You're now in like the 76 season. You're a regular. You got your first season under your belt, 57 games. Your second season as a full-time NHLer, you play 79 games, put up 46 points. your third season, you've got 16 goals, 35 points, but you're breaking 250 to 280 penalty minutes every single season. Who became that one adversary that you knew every time you play? Obviously, you just mentioned Schultz and you mentioned Stan Jonathan, but was there one player who stood out as like your arch rival that maybe you personally didn't dislike, that you might not have liked?
I don't know, offhand individual players, but certainly you go through their roster, and with time, you learn, who has a short fuse and who you can suck into a penalty. And that for
You could
me, it
tweak
was,
a little bit.
yeah, you could tweak and that, and and then there was other players that just wouldn't have anything to do with you. They knew my gig. Uh, but yeah, during those were tremendous years for me, and I think somewhere along the line there in '76 or '77, I became captain of the Red Wings for a couple of years, and then obviously the vicious accident I had kind of slowed things down or changed my whole life.
Tell us about that.
Well, I don't recall any of the incident. I was unconscious or whatever, but obviously a baseball swing across the nose put me out for 2-3 months. Uh, Wilf Payman ended up with a 15-game suspension. God
Yeah,
forbid.
he'd be in jail today, but yeah.
Yes, because it was an assault. But yeah, and then when I came back from the injury, I was just I wasn't the same player.
Now, was there a history between you and Wolf before that happened, or was that just something that he
No,
lost it?
I think he was just a belligerent big player who was a little bit frustrated because again his career, he was putting up numbers and that, but he wasn't winning. And
Right.
he was in Colorado when he when the accident happened. I think Don Cherry was a coach.
I respect you more as a man right now by using the word accident twice in the sentence of when that happened, when somebody did that to you, and that just shows that you're a different caliber of human being in person than most people would say at that, for what happened. But yeah, it was a traumatic injury, and I remember seeing video of it. Obviously, we didn't have it here in New York live, but it was a moment in sports where you look back and you say, what a different era of men played the game back then. Like, now, like I said, he'd probably be in jail for that. There would definitely have been criminal charges
Oh,
filed. And
for sure, and whether he was provoked or not is irrelevant right now. Um, and again, he was 6'4", 220 pounds. Why didn't he come and fight me? Why didn't he drop the gloves? And why swing your stick at my head if you're pissed off?
right, right. Have you
Sash,
guys ever reconciled? Have you ever been in the same room
no.
together? No.
I was in the same room with him, obviously, during trial. Never, tried not to make eye contact with him, or there was nothing for me to say to him, anyways. And then I think Calgary hosted a 3-on-3 tournament, and I played with the Red Wings or the Flames alumni, and he was with a Quebec team, and we were in the same room, but certainly didn't
Well,
shake
that
hands.
also says a lot about him as a coward, in my opinion, and that's me saying that, not you. But if you're going to do something like that, you don't have remorse enough to go back and try to at least make amends on that. I've talked to hundreds of hockey players over the years, and one of the guys I spoke to was Brian Curran, and Brian Curran absolutely told me flat out, I hate Chris Nyland's guts. He was the
Yeah,
one guy in the NHL I hated, blah, blah. And 2 months ago, they reconciled on the air and they did a podcast together and they talked it out. And with, at least with those guys, it wasn't to the almost fatal incident that unfortunately took place for you. It was just on the ice fighting. But, the rivalries are real. But when you can't take that to another level and be man enough to apologize or reconcile after all of that, I lose a lot of respect for Walt Paymont right now by you telling me that story.
yeah, there was no remorse at all ever, and I don't expect anything in the future.
And that's how you got that straight across your nose right there, huh?
No, it's. I'm glad I was married when it happened.
I was going to ask you if you were able to
It
use
was,
that in the bar to pick up chicks, but if you were married, then yeah, no, I don't want to get Mrs.
uh,
Polonich
but
mad at me.
it's certainly recognizable.
It definitely is. Over the years, you had some interesting teammates, and like you said, your teams kind of struggled a little bit, and Detroit wasn't the Red Wings that they went on to be later on. Who was like your favorite teammate? Who was the guy that? Well, let me put it this way. I always ask this question: if Dennis Polonich was going golfing and he had to put three guys in the golf cart with him right now, who would those three teammates be?
Well, it's funny you ask that question. I often think about that, and there's three or four of us that hung around together, and it was Paul Woods, Reed Larson, and myself, and then Andre Saint Laurent joined us when he came over from the Islanders. But yeah, we'd go to dinner together and do stuff together, and
Reed Larson was a badass dude when he came into the hockey league. He had that Fu Manchu mustache, and he was intimidating as hell. And then, he was an excellent hockey player too. I don't want to take away and make him sound like he wasn't, a fantastic player, but he was intimidating looking when he first came up,
yeah,
Reed Larson.
he had an amazing slap shot from the point. I remember him hitting someone in the skate blade, and when they had the plastic black tuck blades, and he just shattered the blade into 100 pieces. But yeah, he was a good person, and same with Paul Woods.
Favorite pregame meal?
Probably pasta.
Yeah.
Mostly pasta. Sometimes a little bit of chicken or a little bit of steak.
What was your favorite road city to go out in, like after a game where you went and got a meal? Like, was there a restaurant somewhere in one city that you had to go
Yeah,
to?
we all looked forward to going out to L.A., California, uh, because we had a couple of days off between games, and you'd make sure you threw in a T-shirt and a pair of shorts for
Hit
your
the
off.
hit the beach a little bit?
Yeah, no suntan though.
No something. That's
No,
funny.
you couldn't show up to the game with a suntan.
I remember talking to Roger Nielsen before he passed one day, and I asked him, I said, what was your favorite? He goes, Florida. He goes, I'd ride my bike to the rink. I'd have my dog run next to me, and I'd be tan by the time I got to the building. And it was funny hearing that from an old time veteran like Roger about just a different world in Florida now with the Panthers and the Lightning and being so established as an NHL city. So it's funny.
Well, it's everybody on the team has their favorite place. So when you'd go into a city or whatever, you'd listen to the gibbering, and everybody had a famous restaurant or a famous bar that we'd frequent to. And I remember I just asked somebody the other day, actually Jason Moss, the quarterback for the Montreal Alouettes, uh, is good friends with my son-in-law. So I asked him, I said, "Oh, do they still have the famous smoked meat place downtown?" He says, "Yeah, it's still there." so they So when we got to the hotel, you check in and that, and straight over to the smoked meat place.
They'll go get it. Let me wait. Montreal, is this pastrami?
Pastrami, yes.
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah,
know. I think I know the name of the place, but I can't remember what you're talking about. But I had a
yeah,
friend of mine go up last year to the Canadians game and said the place was amazing.
yeah.
Celebrities, Detroit, not really a celebrity city, but was there anybody that you became friendly with in your NHL career that was kind of on the famous side, or Detroit maybe a little wise guy, somebody hanging around the arenas?
Well, I remember Sugar Ray Leonard fighting in at Detroit Olympia, and got my picture and autograph with him. Uh, Marie Osmond, Dolly Parton. So yeah, occasionally
A
we
couple
ran.
easy people to look at right there.
And I wasn't shy. I wasn't a nuisance in that, but I always said to myself, if you had the opportunity, come up and say hi. So yeah,
What
over
was
the
what was Dennis Falanch's move like when you see the celebrity? You let him come to you, or you did you walk up to say Dolly Parton and say, "Hey, I need a picture"?
yeah, I'd act like a fan.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I wasn't shy. All they could do was say no.
What was the beer of choice for the Detroit Red Wings when you were playing there?
Oh boy, honestly, probably a draft, whatever,
Oh yeah.
because it was cheap.
On the team buses, like what back in the day, a lot more travel, obviously by bus in the older days in the '70s and stuff like that. What were those road trips like? Was it rookies in the front, vets in the back, the card games? Like, what was your card game that you played, and who was your card
I
crew on
I
the
was
bus rides?
I wasn't a big card guy, but backgammon became popular, a popular game. And again, the guys that played cards went to the back of the bus. The guys that didn't play cards sat near the front. Uh, but again, you had to earn that. Um,
Right.
you know, you had to wait till you got invited, or you didn't bull your way in there.
When you got your first real contract, I know you said you bought a condo, but what was the first thing you bought yourself to spoil yourself and said, "Hey, I'm in the NHL"? Was it a car? Was it?
Well, this is a good heartwarming story. When I got drafted by Detroit, and they offered me a 3 year contract, I really didn't have an agent, so I talked to my coach Patty Janelle about the offer, and I got 7,500 signing bonus, and then a 3 year minor league deal and an NHL deal. Well, because I worked in the mine up in Flin Flon, I had a little bit of money saved, and then I got my signing bonus, um, and I went played in the minors. I think I made 13,500 in the minors. So I came back to my hometown, and I didn't want to live with mom and dad on my farm. I was spreading my wings, and I had a little bit of money. So I bought a cottage on the lake for $8,000, and I paid cash. That was my first place. And
Again on the lake. I want to hear about these lake parties you might have had.
well, you know what? I still have it. I still have the original, not the original cabin, but I rebuilt in that. But I have the same lot, and as I say, I fish in front of the cabin, 200 yards. I catch walleye and pike, and off the
Oh
back
wow,
deck, I can see the number one tee and the ninth green. So it's pretty heartwarming to still have that. I think I bought it in 73, 74.
that's awesome. So your kids have all gone through that. I'm sure your grandchildren have seen it. And
That's where they grew up, and to this day now the grandkids are coming. And when they come, my daughter told me what a great time they had, and how heartwarming it was for her because that's where they grew up, and to see the kids doing the same thing, that the same water sports and stuff that they did when they were kids.
that's awesome. I mean, like I said, family's everything, and that's a great story that you still have it, and three generations now have gotten to go through that, and
Well,
that that's pretty
truthfully,
amazing.
yeah, I'm sorry. I turned 71 the other day, and grandkids is what I live for now.
That's awesome. And like you said earlier, they're all athletes, so you definitely don't be. You're not sitting home being grandpa. You're out all over the place with baseball, basketball, and gymnastics for sure.
Well, and they're at the age now where they can kibitz and that, so they give me the odd barb.
They talk grandpa. So one of your famous teammates is you go down to Adirondack after the NHL career is over. Now, what caused you to go down? Because in '79, you played 66 games. I'm guessing you're more in a checking role at this time because your numbers have declined a little bit on the offensive side, but your penalty minutes are still through the roof. You're breaking 200 minutes every year in '78, '79. And then we get to 79, 80. You play 66 games. You got 127 minutes and 10 points. What was the change there? Was it less ice time? Was it coaching? Was it mentality on
Well,
your part? The injury?
yes, as I said, it was partly because of the injury, um, and you know, Detroit was in there. It was tumultuous. There was a lot of turmoil. There was Bruce Norris was the owner. He sold it to the Ilitch family, who which finally stabilized it. But I think when I was in Detroit, I had 8 coaches in 11 years.
Wow.
You know, and
Wow. That's
yeah. So every time somebody came in, and I think it was Wayne Maxner was the coach that came in and decided to send me and Peter Mahovlich down and George Lyle and Greg Jolly, and he was going to change the world. Um, but yeah, it was a tough place to play because you were always looking over your shoulder. Well, who's next? Who's next? There was
right.
no stability.
So you go down to Adirondack in the AHL. You win the Calder Cup, correct? You win the championship your
Yeah.
first year down there, and you have Dave Hansen as a teammate. You got any good Hansen stories?
Yes, actually, Dave and I became friends because we were a couple of older guys on the team, and so after games and that, we would go out for a bite to eat with the wives, and his kids were the same age as my kids, so we kind of chummed together. But yeah, I became friends with him, and no real, uh, Hanson Brothers stories other than watching the movie 5 different times, like everybody else.
So how realistic to you as a former player who lived that lifestyle as a tough guy, how realistic was the chirping? How realistic was the, the antics that took place in that movie for a guy like you that lived that life?
It was as close to it as you can get, as far as acting. They did a good job.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, in my opinion, the greatest sports movie ever made. I watch it probably once every 2 or 3 months. I sit down and watch it start to finish, and I still laugh. I still get a kick out of it. Another teammate you had back then in Adirondack is somebody I'm going to have on the show next week, Brad Smith. You got any Brad Smith stories or anything I could
Motor,
tweak Brad about?
Motor City Smitty.
Yeah,
He was a character, and again,
the
a
Tom
good
Selleck of
teammate.
hockey.
Yeah, again, one of those teammates that just got your back and stuff. So yeah, he was fun to play with.
You played with Randy Ladouceur down there. You had Pete Mahovlich was also sent down playing on those teams in Adirondack. Joey Patterson, who went on to play, have a nice career in the NHL with the Flyers, the Rangers, and the Kings as a tough guy. So, Ted Nolan was on that team too. I'm noticing now. I'm looking at the
Yeah,
roster. What was Nolan like to play with?
well, he was my line mate. He was a left winger, a good player, and again, tough. Have your back. We had a good line. It was Ted Nolan, Bill Hogebaum, and myself. We all, had a number of games in the NHL. So,
How
so
was it?
yeah,
How was
it,
Adirondack as a city? Like, how was that embraced at the time with the AHL down there?
it was awesome. I remember getting called in the office in Detroit when they sent me down, and they said, Dennis, we're going to send you down to Glens Falls, New York, and all I could remember was New York. And then, oh my God, like I'm small town Saskatchewan. I don't want to, New York City. And then once I got there, and you seen the area, Lake George and Saratoga, and it was nowhere near New York City. Yeah, it
Right.
was. I loved it there. Actually, I bought a lot, and I was thinking of retiring and building there, but uh, changed plans. But yeah, it was fun.
Adirondack's a beautiful city. It's very underestimated how beautiful upstate New York is. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
a little bit different than New York City. So you're with Adirondack. You end up going back up to the Red Wings for 11 games. Was that like on an emergency recall, or was that a chance for Dennis to get to say goodbye to the fans in Detroit? What orchestrated the call up?
no, I think it was just like an emergency recall or whatever. Um,
So you're with Adirondack. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 years, almost 6 full years, and you go become a Muskegon lumberjack in the IHL now, and you win a
well,
damn championship your first year there too.
yes, it was a good move. I wanted to retire on my own terms, and I remember Jimmy DeVilano, the Red Wings manager, calling me in the office and telling me that they were going to go in a different direction. And it was a tough pill to swallow. After 12 years with the organization, gave them everything I had. And back then I couldn't. They weren't hiring ex NHL players like they do today. They make them into an assistant coach or a scout or
Right.
manager or whatever. So and again, like I said, I wanted to retire on my own terms. So Larry Gordon and Ricky Lee, who played in Hartford, I believe, defenseman, called me and asked me if I'd come to Muskegon, and he was in Michigan, so I said, why not? So I went and played there for a couple of years, and like you said, won a championship. So I didn't get a Stanley Cup, but I got a Calder Cup in Adirondack and a Turner Cup in Muskegon. So
Dennis, at what age did you go down to Muskegon? What was your age at that
I
time?
think I was 33 or 34.
You're 34 years old. You put up 222 minutes of penalties in one of the toughest leagues in the history of hockey. What are you doing down there, man? I mean, well, you had a great season, by the way. You put up 32 goals, 36 assists, 68 total points, and 222 minutes in penalties.
Well, in a lot of cases, my stats get overlooked because of the penalty minutes. But yes, I had 18 goals in the NHL one year. I had 32 goals in the minors, so I could score. and to this day when I play rack hockey, I can still put the puck in the net occasionally.
What was the last scrap you remember having as a pro?
Oh God, I don't know, Rick.
I mean,
Too
because
many.
if you're putting up 222 minutes your last season, wow, man. I mean, you are just a different breed,
Back,
Dennis. You're a tough son of a bitch. Holy cow, man.
back,
I never realized that you put that kind of minutes up at 34 years old.
back then they didn't have good referees.
They didn't have good day. Everything was a 10-minute misconduct, right? You
Right.
didn't do anything. That's so funny. So you retire from hockey. What was it like to step away from the game, and what did you do post hockey? What did you go into?
It's a little nerve wracking. I do some public speaking occasionally, and I told them I tell them about the fact that you played pro hockey for 14 years. Everything was done for you. You were handed an itinerary. Be here, go here, do this, do that. Um, but when I retired, what am I going to do? Like, am I going to, I could have gone to the Illich family. They liked me. I could have gone to the Illich family and possibly got a Little Caesars franchise, but I didn't know anything about staffing and payroll and, you know, business. So I just kept saying, you better stay in hockey. You better stay in hockey. So that's when I had an interview for a coaching general manager coaching job near my hometown, near my that cottage that I told you about at Yorkton, Saskatchewan. So yeah, it's like I said, it's the first time I'd ever been interviewed for a job,
Wow, it's got to be such a
real
different lifestyle, you know?
for a real job. Yeah, it's a bit nerve wracking because your career's come to the end, to an end. You got a little bit of money saved up, but you got a young family,
Right.
that you got to raise. We had two girls,
And
so
did Mrs. Polonich get frustrated with Mr. Polonich being home a heck of a lot more that first year? Was there some growing pains there?
oh, there might have been.
That's funny. All the ex-players say the first thing that happened is my wife wanted to throw me out and told me I had to go get a job. So
Well,
that's pretty funny.
even today's athlete, when you retire with 5 or 10 million in the bank, you can't just drop the kids off at school and go golfing every day. You need to have a purpose.
Who
And
was I'll wrap this. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but who's the best player you ever played against? Who was the one guy that you just maybe caught yourself looking at from the bench and saying he's incredible?
Well, Guy Lafleur was amazing. Um, Phil Esposito. I caught the tail end of Bobby Orr when he was in Boston and Chicago. Again, what he did in 610 games in the NHL was amazing. The points that he, put up. Um, so again, there's so many, you
Guy
know.
Lafleur to me was just as a kid getting to watch again every once in a while hockey night in Canada, probably 4 times a year Rangers and Islanders. Got to watch him play. He was incredible. Watching that hair flow coming down the wing, the big shot from the top of the circle, and just he was incredible to watch. And then at the end of his career, he was a Ranger for 2 seasons. I got to see him every night, and he still was just amazing. Like his hands were incredible.
Yeah, he could skate like the wind, and I remember I believe it was '78 when the Red Wings made the playoffs and we played. We made it to the second round, and we drew the Montreal Canadiens, and we go to Montreal and we split the two games. So we go back to Detroit thinking, oh, okay, this is awesome. They beat us 8-1, and Guy Lafleur had 3 goals and 3 assists, and
Wow.
I scored the lone Red Wing goal and broke Ken Dryden's shutout.
Good. I hate Ken Dryden. I'm a Ranger fan. Ken Dryden broke my heart in 1979, the Rangers in the finals, and I know I don't like Ken Dryden. He made my hero Walt Kachuk cry. So yeah,
Oh,
not a Ken Dryden fan, but not on a personal level, just as an athlete level. I actually you can't see it, but the third jersey down is a Guy Lafleur signed jersey. It's one of my
nice.
favorite possessions in the world. The Flying Frenchman was just incredible. Where do you rank Mike Bossy?
Right up there with. I mean, he played in a pretty good line with Clark Gillies and Brian Trotche, who I think was underrated. as a player. But to score at that again at that consistent level, you put him up right up there with Ovechkin and Gretzky and those types of people.
Okay. We'll go through two quick questions, and then I'll let you go. Favorite car of all time? What's the one car Dennis Polonich would want to own or has owned that he just had to have?
Well, when I went to Detroit, I went to Alex Delvecchio because he was a local hero there, and he had an endorsement thing with Packer Pontiac. So I bought my first Firebird Trans Am.
Oh, you had a Trans Am? Oh, it's my favorite car of all time. Now you got me going.
And I had one here a few years ago for a couple of years, and
black or gold?
No, it was an orange.
Oh, you had the burnt orange. Wow.
Burnt orange, yeah. And again, just to put things in perspective, I paid $4,200 for it in Detroit, brand new.
You can't get that. You can't get the chassis rusted out right now for that price. Completely rusted out. You couldn't get one.
Wish I still had it, but yeah.
So now you worked for an owner that owned a pizza franchise, and I ask every single player I interview this question, and this is going to go further with me than anything I've asked you today. I hope you're ready. Does pineapple belong on a pizza?
No.
Absolutely. I knew you were the man, Dennis. I knew you were the man. I just gained so much more respect. I don't care how many times you got slashed in the head and came back and fought a million times, 222 minutes of penalties in 1986. That answer right there was the answer of the day for me.
When I'm in Calgary, I play rec hockey, 55 plus, and once a month we have pizza days. And it's not a popular.
It doesn't belong. It's not a salad. It's not. I don't know. I don't get it. It's not a baked ham. Get that damn thing out of here.
But I do love pineapple.
But on a ham, right?
On its own.
On its own, it's okay too. I'm going to ask you one quick question only because I think of Barry Beck every time I ask this question. Barry, a couple years ago in a men's league, got challenged. He had a guy take a run at him and drop his gloves, and Barry beat the piss out of the guy. You ever have, at post-retirement, ever had an incident where somebody took a run at you or tried to test Dennis Polonich?
Not anymore, but certainly it happened to me when in my 50s. I was playing, and there was a young guy, was acting a little bit foolish or whatever. So I challenged him, and it didn't last long. But
didn't last long for him, is what you want to say. But I'll say it for you. Yeah. I see the little smile on your face right there. I love it.
Yeah, but I play rec hockey, and the guys are very respectful, and no hitting, no slap shots, and
right. I only asked that question because, like I said, I saw Barry Beck had a scrap, and someone recently told me about only maybe a year or two ago, Al Iafrate was playing in an alumni game, and a guy took like 6-7 runs at Al, and then Al finally just turned around and grabbed him by his throat and dropped him with one punch.
My helmet came off one practice, and I got hit on the head, and I required stitches and that. And again, the guy was just being an idiot. But that's when I switched from playing in a league just to rec hockey.
To rec hockey. Yeah, at a certain time, you got to just respect the fact that some people aren't that bright. Yeah. And you did this for a living and know what you're doing. But, Dennis, I want to say thank you so much for joining me. This was amazing for me. I had nothing but the utmost respect for you as a player, and now getting to know you a little bit on a personal level. I just want to say thank you. Merry Christmas to you and your family. And, God bless your grandchildren with their quest to become professional athletes.
Thank you. It's going to be fun in the next few years.
Is there anything you want to promote right now? Any website, any social media, anything where, you want to tell people they could find you?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to let you go right now, Dennis, and this is the Hockey World Order with our special guest, Dennis Polonich. Merry Christmas to you and your family, Dennis, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Rick.